Want to get faster? Good, but you need a better strategy. Today's episode is a mashup of the best speed advice from three coaches who know what it takes: Jacob Cabezudo, Sal Marinello, and Laura Stark. These clips break down the biggest mistakes athletes make, how to train smarter, not just harder, and what actually works if you want to build real game speed. This is a speed playbook I wish more athletes followed, so stay along and tune in. A lot of football players, though, they want to comment saying bigger, stronger, faster. It's like, okay, you want to get bigger, but you also don't want to lose speed. And I've seen certain, say, wide receivers, DBs, who will not gain weight, and they will be undersized for their position because they're so afraid to gain weight and lose speed. And then now we got the DNs and the linebackers. So how do you get bigger and get faster?
It's tough because I feel like in high school, in many high schools, they run too much and too low of an intensity, and you're just burning through calories. And so that doesn't help at all. But when it comes to what I can control, when it comes to the training of the athletes I work with, I'm telling them, look, this sprinting's a full body activity. It's not just a lower body activity. You are working your core, you're working your lats, you're working your shoulders in such indirect ways. You don't get sore in that way, but you're building muscles that you barely ever use from sprinting at a very high speed. I don't think players should be too worried about staying small if they're working speed, because speed training is not a volume activity. You're not going very high volume. I think a lot of players underestimate how little volume, they overestimate the volume that they need to get faster. So a lot of kids are like, oh, I did 10 100-yard sprints yesterday, I should be good to go. Like, no, you cooked yourself yesterday doing 70% runs down the field. At our sessions, we do 2 to 4 extremely high speed sprints with full recovery. So you're not really burning that many calories, and you're staying fast. You're getting the work that you need. I think a lot of the problem is athletes try to like dirty bulk and everything, and they end up causing themselves to scare themselves if they start eating just everything in sight. And when it comes to maintaining speed and improving speed, the fastest guys that I work with are jacked. I have a junior right now that I'm working with that runs 21.5 miles per hour. He runs a 4.65 laser timed 40, and full six pack, fully developed arms, fully developed chest, exactly what you want to see from a college football player as a junior in high school, because he trains the right way. He trains in a fast twitch, high intensity, max recovery way, and he's still able to put on size. I wish I had before and after pictures of what he looked like as a freshman versus what he looks like now, but he is living proof. And a lot of the guys that I've worked with are living proof of how even though you gain weight and you gain muscle, speed almost gets enhanced by muscle. One of the things I also tell even the youth athletes I work with, the reason why a lot of the youth athletes I work with are slow is because they're not strong enough, right? It's just they're skinny, they're bony, and if they had some muscle put onto those bones, they'd be able to push off the ground. They would have longer strides. And it's really not just the muscle that you put on, it's the quality of the tissue, right? Fast twitch tissues.
Like when I think about the bigger and the faster, part of it is also the same thing of like how you do it. Like if you're gaining 2 pounds a week, like consistently, then yeah, you're gonna slow down. But if you're doing like the half a pound a week, you're not doing like relying on the fast food and the mass gainers and things like that. Like, yeah, you are gonna get, like one of my guys, I give an example too of he gained 30 pounds over 8 months, but I mean, again, it was slow and steady, and he did get a little bit faster. And then after that, he worked on his speed training, and then he shaved his 60 from a 7.55 to 6.71.
Wow.
Um, and so, like, yeah, but he is still like 30, 40 pounds heavier than he originally was. When you are training guys or gals, how often are you working with them, or how often should they be training to get faster, like each week?
So I always recommend twice a week. And if possible, 3 times a week, but none of these kids have the ability schedule wise to train 3 times a week. So twice a week is really that sweet spot, because any more, we're probably tacking on too much volume that they're already getting at their practices and in their games and tournaments. 2 times a week is perfect, because speed detrains within 5 to 7 days. It's a lot different from strength and conditioning and muscle building. Like, you can maintain muscle even after you take a month off of strength training, as long as you're eating right, and you can maintain muscle and strength to a degree. But when it comes to speed's so touchy. If you take 2 weeks off, there's a really good chance that your speed is going to diminish, and let alone if you take a couple months off. Now, obviously, there's things that you can't control, like injuries and stuff like that hold you out for more than a month or so. That's just something we can't control. But I really suggest 2 to 3 times a week of high speed sprinting. One day is focused on acceleration, so short burst stuff. We do a lot of horizontal force production, so pulling sleds, doing broad jumps. And then the second day is more of a vertical force emphasis, top end speed, more upright sprint mechanics, and longer sprints.
So, one thing I did want to highlight too with that, I try to tell my athletes, like, because of that fear of getting slow is, when they're gaining size, is like, yeah, like also doing it a couple times a week, because part of it's like, okay, if you're gaining size but you're not training speed, then yeah, you're probably going to lose speed. But and I think that's huge that you highlight that there is a short window on that, like a shorter window compared to strength training, where you can lose it a lot quicker. Because I sure didn't know that, and I had those kind of like genetics where I do have more of that explosiveness in my genes. Like, my brother was like 5'11" and he could dunk. He had that explosiveness, but yeah, if you don't train it, then you're not going to really maximize it.
Absolutely. There's a connection there for sure. So for the athletes that are scared to lose speed when they gain size, just stay up on your speed while you're making a commitment to gain size. It's really that simple. I've had kids throughout this whole off season gain 10 to 15 pounds and still have very solid speed improvements, and they're going along their developmental track in a very smart way by, like you said earlier, gaining a half a pound to a pound a week. And I mean, if you realize, like, 6 months of an off season and you gain half a pound to a pound per week, that's 25 pounds that you gain in an off season. For a high school athlete, that is pretty damn successful in my book, especially if you can maintain or improve your speed while doing that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So for the athletes though, I know there's a lot of them that listen they don't have access to people like you, and I know you have your social media, which I definitely recommend people go to your, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. But what are some of those some basic drills or some key drills that they can do at home to maintain this kind of stuff and build this?
Yeah, absolutely. My biggest thing is, if you are balling on a budget when it comes to speed training, you should at least buy a $5 stopwatch, get a friend, get a parent. When I was in high school, it's funny, I would have my mom come out to the field with me and time my 40-yard dashes with a stopwatch. And I'd get mad at her if it was like worse than I thought it was going to be, because I thought she was doing something wrong, but it was at least something where I was running as fast as I possibly could, getting timed by somebody. All you really need to do is sprint extremely fast, getting timed by someone. If you have a hill in your area, a hill is perfect. Another key training principle that I have, and I borrowed it from somebody. Everything, and that's one thing, everything that I have, somebody else has thought of it and implemented it before. But one of the biggest things that I think is a huge part of your speed training is making sure that you rest 1 minute per 10 yards that you sprint. If you run a 40-yard dash, you should be resting 4 minutes. If you run a hill that's 20 yards long, you should be resting 2 minutes per hill sprint. And hills does not have to be a conditioning method. It should be a speed training method. So when you go to a hill around your neighborhood or around your area, go to that hill, run for the intention of running your absolute fastest up the hill, and then fully recover before the next one. There's no secret special drill that you can do that's going to get you faster outside of sprinting to the maximum of your ability. Outside of sprinting, things that can help you enhance your speed is jumping. So doing box jumps, doing depth drops, jumping over hurdles if your high school has hurdles readily available, doing broad jumps. What I do when I train my broad jumps is I just get a tape measure out and I measure my broad jump. And just because you're measuring your broad jump doesn't mean that it's not training. You are training your broad jump, especially when you're measuring it. So doing those types of things, if you go out and spend $20 on a stopwatch, tape measure, and a jump rope, that's all you need for speed training. And you train 2 to 3 times a week of running as fast as you can, jump rope 5 minutes a day, and measure your broad jump twice a week and hurdle jump once or twice a week, you're going to see a lot of good results.
Dude, you're making me want to go and I got a steep hill right outside my house. I'm like, I want to go do some hills after this.
No. It's fun. I have to motivate people because it's one of the biggest things when it comes to training is you have to take it home, especially for the athletes that only train once a week with me. Like if you don't take it home and you don't do the stretches that I tell you to do or the little things that you need to do, you're not going to get the best results. So I always like to motivate people in that way and empower them to take the steps necessary to be the fastest athlete they can.
Yeah. So if you were doing hills, like you said, full rest in between, how many hill sprints, I guess, would you be aiming for?
It depends on the length of the hill, and this applies to all types of sprinting. The amount of reps that you do sprinting depends on the distance that you run. It's just like how much volume you squat. You're not going to squat 95% of your max for 10 to 12 reps. You're going to do 1, maybe 2 or 3 if possible. So with acceleration, let's just say hills and acceleration are one and the same. You want to sprint anywhere between 6 to 10 reps of 10 to 25 yards. That's all you need for acceleration. And they have to be very, very high quality sprints. So 6 to 10 reps of 10 to 25 yards. If I'm doing sled sprints that day, we're probably going to do 5 unresisted sprints and 5 sled sprints. And then for top speed days, we're doing 2, maybe 3 40-yard sprints. And so you could obviously mess with the range there. You can go anywhere between 30 and 60 yards of high speed running each sprint. So 2 to 3 reps of those. But the key to the top speed days is making sure we reach our top speed, which you generally reach between 30 and 40 yards if you're a well-trained athlete. And so when you're running a hill, it just depends on the length of the hill. A lot of the hills around me are between 20 and 40 yards. So that means I'm running anywhere between 6 and 8 hills at full recovery. And then I'm cooked. Like you realize like on your last set of squats that your legs can't go any longer. When it comes to sprinting, that's when you stop. When you see a 10% dip in your performance when sprinting, that's when you stop.
That's good, dude. Like I said, you really have worked these things out, and I think that's huge. And I think that makes you again even more valuable of a coach of recognizing those limits and figuring those out, not just from the research or the experts like Les Spellman and whatnot, but the tried and true of like actually like doing it with your people.
Yeah, I always preach quality over quantity. And so when it comes to every individual athlete, I know when they're dragging. Like I know when someone's like absolutely cooked during a session. Like we're not running again. I'm not going to run you just because I don't like your efforts. It's because something's up. You probably got 5 hours of sleep texting your girlfriend last night. That's why you're not energetic. So you're gonna not run as much as you should today.
Now, this is a common conversation is the specialization, but at the same time, the way that you're talking about it around, just the lack of ability to move properly is huge. And when you're doing, like you said, always around a soccer ball, always around a basketball, always around a certain ball or whatever it might be, it's like you don't learn how to move in other ways. And we have plenty of examples. Like last podcast, one of the athletes I was referenced was Mahomes. It was about baseball, but he talked about how Mahomes is a guy who played both football and baseball, and you see it in how he, can leverage a lot of those throws. Yeah,
Yeah, it's sports IQ. It's all these things on top of the. I love the term the movement vocabulary because that really sums it up. It's like what can you do? How do you do it? You give the body a problem and let it solve it. That's usually the best way. That's why free play is so important. Climb the rope, climb the jungle gym. Go down the slide and be able to land on your feet and run because someone's chasing you. Those are all things that, if you look at sports, a lot of them replicate those same attributes. And that's the sprint. What the sprint is doing is it's training the body at the highest level, so your nervous system is firing. And Nick, that's what this is all about. It's what is your nervous system trained to do? If you're grinding out deadlift and squat and bench press and overhead press and those single muscle group exercises that I see in Division I training programs of all sports, you're teaching your body to move as a collection of parts, and you're teaching your body to move slowly. There's no speed component in any of those lifts, and those are just training muscles, not training movements. That's what I always say. You train movements, not muscles. So why do we have these pulled muscles all the time? Why do we have groin, back, hip, all of these oblique problems in baseball? Because we're training slowly, and then in our competition, we're moving explosively. And again, I'll go back to the hair in the tomato sauce. More and more hair is being put into the tomato sauce, so it becomes inedible or unedible, whichever. So that's where we're at, and that's where I kind of have taken the stand, and I tell people all the time, if you want to fix baseball, nobody gets in the weight room.
Next one is butt kicks, and this is the warm-up aspect of it, but also you mentioned in your content, you talked about butt kicking a little bit, but I think it was more so about the movement and less about the warm-up.
Correct. So when I talk about butt kicking, I'm talking about butt kicking in a sprint, which is not what we want to do. We call it hip lift. A lot of people are going to call it knee drive. The reason we call it hip lift is just because it gives us a little more purpose behind what we teach and how we teach it. So I'm going to use the word hip lift. That means early activation at the hip, right? Obviously your knee's coming forward if you're doing it correctly. If you're butt kicking, you are not doing hip lift. You are not getting everything front side. So butt kicking is something that we want to stay away from. Now with the drill, I never talk about the drill butt kicking because I would never use it because I don't really find it to be relevant, because the things that it would be doing would be, again, moving, loosening up, ground contact, and I can think of a million other ways to do that are relevant and that don't require practicing a bad habit of kicking back.
Good. Okay. I like, because it's like literally every warm up I see, I'm pretty sure I see butt kicks in almost every warm up that I see, especially in football.
Not mine. You've never seen mine then.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. And then what about hills, running hills in general? And I know there's a few different pieces of this, so I'll let you unpack that one.
Okay, I love a good hill sprint. Again, a time and place, because it can beat you in. And do we need to be beaten or do we need to work? It's just, again, understanding. Sometimes you do need to be beaten. There's a time and place for that too. But hill sprints are great, right? Going back to the butt kicking comment, I think that's a really good transition. You can't butt kick while you're running hills. So I think that it really helps you with form and getting your hips moving and getting your feet in the proper place. And like gravity is working against you. So I think that hill sprints can be a very good thing. Again, how are we using it? Is it so abused that it's a 20-second hill sprint? Now that's a conditioning, that's a whatever. This is a whole different combination or conversation. But when talking about hill sprints and talking about acceleration, there is a time and a place. But make sure that ultimately they can translate that back to the field. So after we do hill sprints, I want you to take what you just felt and translate that back to the field, just like any other drill.
Okay. Because, yeah, I see hill sprints. I mean, I remember even back in middle school, because we had a little field, or we had the field and then we had like a hill right next to it. And that was like a common thing, was we would have to run the hills for like it was more conditioning in that case.
Right.
But I've also, yeah, it's usually at the end of the workout that I see this. It's usually a 2-hour workout or practice and then hills at the end.
I mean, again, to each their own. I don't know what the purpose of that section is. If I'm going to be doing hill sprints because of just the view I take on how to train, on how to perform, I would be doing hill sprints very early on because it's a teaching tool to sprint. But again, if I also need to end with conditioning, because, and I don't do too much of that, but because I think that it's a pretty easy thing to do. But let's say that I do need to condition my kids for whatever reason, that you can use that as a tool, and that's fine. That's okay. But I think that, and again, I can't talk for any coaches but me. It's like, what's the purpose of today's workout? And there can be multiple purposes. You can have conditioning at the end, but just understanding what's the purpose. If your experience growing up was anything like mine, I imagine there wasn't a lot of purpose. It was about running the kids. Right. Middle school, back when I was in middle school, it was about run those hills and be tired.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, definitely. And even now it's like there's still there's a hype about it. It is also about like, oh, like who's going to get to the hill the fast, or the top of the hill the fastest.
Right. And that's good competition. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think like sometimes what I see is, again, you end up doing way more reps than you necessarily need to. Like, I guess I know it depends on the height of the hill, but on average, like how many reps or maybe how many minutes do you think, like if it's more for, I guess, speed purposes, how long should that look like?
Well, if I was going to do it for speed purposes, I'm not going to use minutes because I'm fine with a long recovery. I don't care how slow you walk down, that's fine. But if we're talking about speed, I think the way that I would do that is doing probably 10 minutes of prep work on what are we practicing on the ground, moving into the hill, and that could be that could simply be 3 reps. It could be 3 sets of 5. Like it really depends on what it looks like and what we're trying to accomplish. But then again, what I said for speed purposes, 3 sets of 5 sounds like a lot. And when I say even that's actually way too much for speed. Like, because I'm taking a long break in between. My goal is to be really like have 100% to give in each rep. And do that 100%. And then again, after the hill, we're always translating that back to the playing field, the court, whatever it is. Can we now use what we were looking for here with placement, with hip lift, all of these things, now translate that back to just flat ground?
I want to speak to the mental side specifically of speed, because number one, there are mental blocks when you look at, when you're doing jumping type stuff, like anything like jumping on a like I've seen like, box jumps or a lot of those types of things that, like yesterday I was watching my nephew does track, and there were some kids that did hurdles, and a couple of those kids ate it like pretty hard. And so it's like, I guess, can you speak to the mental side of speed sprints, whether, for the athlete, and like, what are some big things that you've learned over the years to help those athletes on the mental side of it?
Yeah, as far as like having blocks or having a hurdle, literally or figuratively in front of you, I think that if you're really struggling on a day, sometimes it's best to go backwards. Let's go backwards to another drill, or sometimes let's even just move away from it. You're not going to win every day. You're not. It's just not going to happen. And we've all had those days where some days you just have to call it a day. And then also recognize that you're doing the best thing for you. It's not like, oh man, I failed today. Like, no, today wasn't it. I'm just going to change the plan, and that's okay, because like I know I've talked about having a plan this whole time, but sometimes the plan needs to be changed. So being flexible and meeting yourself where you're at. And I think that girls who have, a cycle every single month, and we're going through a lot, not just like at any point in the month, there's always things going on, and girls especially need to be mindful of that. Sometimes you're going to need to stop because you're not going to get what you wanted to out of this session. And boys too, I'm not saying this is only a girl thing. Some days you're just not going to get what you wanted to out of the session. And although we had this plan to come in and work hard and accomplish XYZ, maybe today is actually a recovery day. Let's work on, let's change up the whole plan. Let's work on mobility. Let's work on, instead of speed, we're working on decel. Let's just change it up, or take one step back and maybe you can go forward. So the mental block, we're all going to have bad days, and sometimes those days last a little bit longer. But it's, again, meeting you where you're at. And I think to kind of stay on track, but like gear off another one, I think that athletes coming back from injuries, that could be really tough, where they want to get back and they want to get back quicker, and it feels like they feel behind, and they feel like they just are itching to get back and all these things. And again, meeting yourself where you're at, because is training hard going to be the best thing for your longevity? Maybe, maybe not. Or maybe, well, if you're out for a month, or God forbid, 6 months or something, taking a time and looking at like the tactical side, studying the game, watching film, doing that sort of thing, and just finding other ways to feel like, oh, I worked today. And I've had athletes that come in and I'm like, oh my God, if I could do anything for you, I wish I could just make you stop working so hard. You're hurting yourself. Yeah. Every once in a while, there's an athlete who just works too hard. And so having that conversation with them and letting them know that it's okay. I know you feel like you want to check a box every day. And I love that about you. It is one of your greatest strengths, but it's also one of your greatest weaknesses. And so finding new ways to do that. And again, some of the training sessions, like some of my sessions, aren't that physically demanding. It's about changing patterns. Maybe that's good for you. Or maybe it is a study day and look at film day, and kind of getting them away from the same thing every single day.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you talk about like maybe it's not the right day to do. I mean, there's a lot that you said that was good right there. But one thing that stuck with me, because I've experienced this, is if it's not your day to do that specific thing, like, the speed stuff, it's like, okay, maybe you were sitting too much in class or whatever, your hip flexors are tight, and you need to like focus on, let's open those hip flexors up so that maybe tomorrow, so recovery, so that maybe tomorrow you can actually do it more effectively.
Exactly. We've all had those days, and sometimes you just got to stop. I was a pole vaulter in college, actually. And there'd be days that it's a pole vault day. I'm excited, right? These are my favorite days. I don't have to sprint. I don't have to do all the hard stuff. It's a pole vault day. And there have been days that it's like, well, you're not going into the pit, and so you're going to get hurt. And you can sit here in insanity doing the same thing over and over and over and sucking today and just making yourself madder at yourself and building more anxiety so that the next time you come back, you're thinking about all the bad reps. Or you can just stop and call it a day, because you're not doing anything but practicing bad habits and building anxiety. And sometimes stopping is the best thing.
Speed doesn't just happen. It's built with intention, recovery, and the right tools. Whether you're training with a coach or figuring it out on your own, remember this: speed rewards consistency. If you got value out of today's episode, send it to a teammate, and be sure to connect with each of the guests. Their links and the links to their original episodes are in the show notes. And as always, keep striving for greatness.